Hey, welcome to another edition of Buzz, Words, and Music. I'm here today with one of my favorite people who I only get to see once a year, but it's always a pleasure when I do. Independent filmmaker, um, basic entrepreneur, Renaissance man, he's been described as Henrique Couto.
Hi, how's it going? It's
It's
good to see
going
you,
good.
Buzz.
Yeah, we didn't get to see each other last year.
No, apparently something was going around. I don't
Yeah,
remember any of the details, but
yeah. It, I don't know if anybody else heard about it or not, but
yeah, it was
yeah,
kind of underground.
it interrupted a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
So you've been an independent filmmaker basically since you were a preteen.
I was just talking about that the other day because speaking of, the COVID-19 restrictions and
That's what it was.
and
Yeah.
yeah, I know I actually have a note card to remind me. No, but because of all of that, one of the things that has obviously gatherings have been reduced or had been reduced a lot. So I just attended my first and vended at my first movie convention in almost, a year and a half, almost 2 years.
That's right. Yeah.
That was just over the weekend. And it made me nostalgic because I realized that I've been vending at movie conventions since I was 14 years old,
Wow.
and I just celebrated my 35th birthday. So so 21 years of vending, and
Woo.
2020 was the only year I didn't do a single convention of any sort. Um, so that was kind of a wild thing, but it also made me think a lot about how long I've been at it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, more
Nothing.
time than not.
Yeah. It definitely puts things into perspective. But that's
Yeah.
good. You've obviously spent well over half your life doing what you love to do.
And that includes the years 1 through 9. That includes elementary school.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, I've always been I've just always been an obsessive type. That's, I think, one of the big elements I'm realizing. Very once
You?
I like yeah, me. I know it's shocking.
I,
It's
it,
shocking.
I would have never pegged you for that, but
But
no,
what
serious.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, and when you have your passion, it's not obsessive. It's just pursuing your art and your passion, and obsession doesn't really come into play so much. To others, it may be an obsession.
I mean, I find it to be an obsession because I just the fact that, like, to this day, somebody, and they do all the time. People will email me and be like, "Hey, I want to get a camera. I want to shoot something and I want to get a camera. What camera do you recommend?" And my immediate response is, "Well, what's your budget?" And then once they tell me the budget, I immediately have a camera. I haven't bought a camera to shoot a movie on in 3 years, but I'm always aware of the
Of what?
cameras that are out there and which ones are new, because someday I will, upgrade or whatever. That's the kind of obsession I'm talking about. It's just like this need to stay on top of so much that's
and and
involving what I do.
there is so much to stay on top of.
Yes, no,
uh,
there is.
yeah,
And
no, I mean, because technology is just completely, um, the camera you bought 3 years ago is probably a great camera, I'm sure. But compared to what's out there now, and that's why we have our little wish list.
oh yeah, well, and what's happened is it's actually we're starting to reach a point where the cameras are advancing so fast, the technology is advancing so fast, but it's actually we're so far along already that my 3-year-old 4K camera is still perfectly good. It just doesn't have the immense bells and whistles.
Exactly.
And but it didn't used to be that way. There was a good solid chunk of time there where if your camera was 5 years old, it probably lacked necessary quality, because
Mm.
because it was jumping so much. Because we went from when I started making movies, the big revolution was the mini DV revolution. That was a type
Oh,
of tape that
yeah.
you could put in your camera, but it recorded digital information, so it looked a lot better. Even a $500 consumer mini DV camera looked just leaps and bounds better than a consumer like analog camera, like a high 8 millimeter or whatever. So I remember that being a revolution, the mini DV revolution. Then around 2010, 2011 was the DSLR revolution, which is what most people are used to now because most people take a photo camera and
Right.
turn it to video mode and shoot gorgeous looking video.
Yeah.
But that was an incredible moment because people were like, holy crap, I can have a camera that didn't cost more than $2,000 and I can just swap lenses on it and
Yeah.
it'll look cinematic because
Hmm.
what cinematography really is it's moving photography. So having a photographic camera but that records video was a humongous change because we were all used to the video camera is what it is. The lens is attached. It zooms in, it zooms out. You're kind of at the whims of Sony or RCA or whoever made that
Right.
camera. But then all of a sudden these DSLRs come out and it's just like, hey, you want to buy a lens from 1975 for $45 on eBay? It'll pop it right on your camera and try it out. And to this day, when I shoot great looking movies, they're
Uh-huh.
shot on glass, on lenses from the 70s and 80s, because
Wow.
I was able to get the type of lens I wanted, but for a price I could actually afford.
Hmm.
And they give this warm oldness. They don't look as snappy and sharp. And I feel like that actually works in their benefit.
And I could see in certain types of film that definitely would
Oh
work.
yeah. Well, and
Uh,
it's mainly because our eyes are trained for the movies that were made before we were around because we watched them growing up.
yeah.
So in the 60s, 70s, 80s, they had these old lenses. They didn't have anti-reflective coatings. They were prone to haze, they were prone to flares, they were prone to all these things that now lenses are beautifully designed to not give you so much of. To the point where now people are like, dude, you should buy these new lenses. They're uncoated. And it's like, we like billions of dollars in research developed those coatings so that we can now go, ew, you use a coated lens? I just want pure glass.
Yeah.
So
Well, and the music instruments and things are very similar. I mean, they've undergone some massive changes over the years. I mean, I remember the first time I bought a synthesizer, you can only play one note at a time. And there are so many albums from the late 60s and early 70s where you hear all these synthesizers, but they could only play one note at a time. And so, you're constantly tracking and layering and doing all that. Now, of course, we can lay our hands down and play, as many notes, up to about, usually about 16. Um, which if you don't have that many fingers.
well, maybe you don't.
Well, that's true. There might be some people out there that can can double up, but it's that same kind of thing. The technology just moves everything to a different direction, but there's still times where I like to rely on old school stuff from almost the same perspective you were talking about, because this is what people kind of grew up hearing.
Yeah.
And so if you can take that past sound or look or whatever and move that into the future, it's almost a win-win.
Mm-hmm. Because with video, a good example is, or with film rather, a good example is you'd watch a film at 24 frames a second,
Right.
and that is not the way we see the world. It looks different.
Yeah.
So, and when they developed cameras that shot 60 frames a second that look more like the way we observe the world, people are just like, looks weird.
Yeah.
Because we're used to, there being a lack of reality to the movies we're watching, which I find fascinating. The fact that we look for that 24 frames, so to where it looks like it's moving, but not good enough. Because that's the space that our brains have decided is where movies and a lot of TV shows and stuff exist. I find stuff like that really interesting because it is art is not science.
Right.
Although art is science, it is not science. It's up to interpretation and understanding, and
Totally.
it changes constantly.
And it changes whoever's hands it's in as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So which brings me, we've worked together quite a bit, and I think how many films have you done? Would you say?
As director,
Yeah, as a
se- uh,
director, we'll start there.
17.
17, man. Uh, and you're only 35.
Correct.
Whew. I haven't even put out 17 pieces of music in my entire life. Um, that might be a little bit of an exaggeration, but
A little bit, but
that is that's obsessive. No,
no,
um,
it is though. I'm okay with it. I'll own it. I
no,
don't mind.
it's pretty amazing, and especially that you've been able to do that, um, because we all know as artists, it's not always economically feasible to pursue your art the way you would like to.
There's no doubt about that.
You have to get lucky in a few instances that can bring you to another level. What was the first movie you did?
The first film I ever made was a tastefully titled film called Marty Jenkins and the Vampire Bitches. Uh, I was knee deep in my like horror comedy phase. You know, I was 18 years old when I made that movie, and before that I made dozens of shorts and little movies and things like that. But that was the first time I said like this is going to be it. This is the 90-minute movie. Actually, I think I aimed for 80. It ended up being around 90, but like I was like it has to be at least 80 minutes and it has to have one coherent story, beginning, middle, end.
And you wrote and produced and directed. And,
I wrote it with the lead actor, so we would
okay.
like kind of go back and forth, and then yeah, I produced it, directed it. I didn't do all the camera shooting, but I did all the lighting setups. It's a long there's a difference between director of photography and camera operator. So I was the
Yeah.
director of photography, but not the camera operator. And I edited it as well.
Yeah, and we all know how much fun that is.
Not a huge fan. The first thing I
No.
outsourced the moment I was able was the editing.
Yeah, I mean whether it's editing film or editing music, it is not it's not my favorite thing to do.
It wears you out. You know, when you're editing a movie, there's a point where your eyes don't really want to focus anymore. And when you're editing, you know, because I mix my movies too, so and that's very similar to mixing music. It's different but alike.
Yeah.
But I learned a lot about ear fatigue. I learned a ton
Oh
about that.
yes.
How if you mix all day long, you mix for 10 hours, there's a point where you're just going to spend the next morning fixing all the stuff you mixed, you know,
Yes.
once you work past 11 or 12 at night.
The key to that, at least on the musical end, because I have spent 14 hours on a mix, just the day one.
Sure.
And, but I tend to work in like 45-minute increments. I get up and do something, and I work at fairly low volume so
Mhm.
that I'm not stressing my ear out. And at the end of something like, let's say I've done a scene in a movie for you, I will, after I feel good about that scene, I'll go take my break, and then I'll come back in and I'll just crank it
Yeah.
to hear what I have. And then, you usually have to tweak that because music does sound different
Oh
at a
yeah.
higher volume than it does at a lower volume. And when you're looking at theater, um, because that's something I was never used to, that becomes another animal in itself.
I
So
bet.
I, I think the first now, I met you. What year was that when I met you?
I want to say 2010 or 11.
Was
It had to have been 2010 or 11.
yeah,
Maybe even '09. It might have even been that early.
yeah. When did you do depression?
That was in 2011 and 2012. So we definitely
Okay,
met in '09 or 10.
yeah. I think Andrew, who I had on the show last week, he 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 talks about how he has this film festival every year,
Mhm.
and you come from Athens, Dayton was it? No, Dayton,
Yeah, I come from
Ohio,
Dayton.
to Athens, Georgia, every year like clockwork,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure what made you approach me the first time. I know I had just started doing a couple of things for Andrew, and I don't know if it was based on something you heard at one of the shows or.
I remember it being incredibly casual,
Yes.
because the way it kind of went down was like I mean, we had met and become friendly. I mean, Andrew has a way of,
Yeah.
of meeting
Pairing people.
like-minded people to exactly. So I'm sure we just had like great conversation and stuff at the screenings. I don't remember if I'd heard anything immediately before, but I was working on Depression the movie, and the movie is broken into four little movies
Right.
inside of it. So it just kind of came about as like the most low risk, chill way to try out collaborating, because it was like, hey, you want this? I think it was like 16-minute,
Yeah. Bill.
16, 17 minutes. Yeah, the Bill segment. It's like 16 or 17 minutes. And I was also excited because each segment had its own composer.
Yeah.
So they all had like this their own flavor, and yours had like this really this fullness, which was actually, in hindsight, I actually rewatched Depression the movie a week ago, or a week and a half ago. Just I hadn't seen it in years and years.
Right.
And it's funny, in hindsight, Bill's segment that you composed has the least amount of characters and the least amount of locations and the most amount of musical score, the most amount of instruments, the most amount of flourish. I
Right.
actually think that's kind of a good combination.
And
It kind of makes it feel fuller in a different way.
yeah, and I did that one with my friend and partner Rick Hinkle,
Yeah,
who did all the guitar stuff, um, because I know you were on a time frame with this,
yeah,
and I remember telling Rick, we have to do something involving a ukulele because Henrik loves ukulele,
it's true.
and he and I came up with that little song that we do with it almost comes out very Woody Allen-ish.
Yeah, I would
Uh,
agree.
and then his approach to his section was he took the I forget the name of the movie now. It was one Neil Young had done the music for, and Neil didn't write music for a movie. He just sat down with a guitar and and just played whatever came to mind when the scene came up.
Yeah,
And that's what Rick did in his portions of that. My sections were a little more scored out. Then from Depression, and I remember you telling me it went over very well.
absolutely.
And I think Babysitter Massacre was next.
That was the big follow up. Yeah, that was the one
That
where I couldn't imagine the film without your score.
well, that I don't know if I may have told you some of this because we over the years, but we only get to talk that a couple of times. But in doing that score, there are two things happen. I brought Rick in because every time you had um, a nude scene of any sort,
Yeah,
and I scored it, it sounded like a '70s porn flick.
yeah, I remember. No, you did tell me that. Yeah,
Okay,
so you brought Rick in because he would do a little bit more of like an
he just
airy
he did
acoustic.
classical
Like,
guitar,
yeah, yeah,
and it worked perfectly.
yeah,
But you can tell the first scene where the girl's in the tub, that's me, and that's when I was like, it's a little too '70s. But all the tensions and all that kind of stuff, um, I worked on, and I remember working on one scene. I can't tell you what it is. I can't recall what it is, but I finished about 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'd been working on the film that day for at least 10 hours. And I was like, all right, I need to go to bed. So I go in the bedroom, I start taking off my shoes, and all of a sudden I hear this smack on my patio. Immediately I wrote my death scene. I mean, the music, I'm scoring what it turned out that we had some high winds going, and it knocked a piece of plywood off of my balcony right onto the cement.
Oh
And
wow, yeah, that'd be really loud.
it was extremely loud. And you can imagine after seeing,
Yeah,
for,
you might get a little paranoid. Might be a
oh
little
man.
paranoid.
Um, so, all of a sudden the music starts going through my head and going, oh, great. But, that could be, it could have turned completely around and been an episode in, a Twilight Zone or something, or Black Mirror.
Oh
So,
man.
um, and then we did how many? What came after Babysitter? I know you had other movies that
Oh,
you're
sure, sure.
doing. There was like select ones that you would pass off to me.
Yeah.
Uh,
The next one was A Bulldog for Christmas.
yeah. Now that was fun. That was a fun movie to do, because I got to orchestrate a little more, and with my girlfriend at the time,
Christmas
we wrote a
everywhere.
theme
Yeah.
song,
Ding
and
dong ding.
yep,
I still can hear it if I think of it. I'll hear it right
yeah,
away.
yeah. It's a holiday favorite around here. So Christmas is coming. Anybody wants to check out the film A Bulldog for Christmas?
It's
And
available on Pluto TV and Tubi TV for free.
all right, and of course, you can purchase the Christmas Everywhere theme song for the
Oh yeah.
movie. That was a lot of fun. That was the first time I'd ever done a theme for one of your movies per se.
Yeah, like a theme song that was like
Yes,
it was in and of itself a song,
Babysitter
not an
Massacre.
overture.
Right.
Yeah.
Babysitter Massacre never had a theme. I gave the character, the killer, um, just this real kind of demented diminished chord thing, where I just broke up two diminished chords into arpeggios, and then I assigned it to something so that it would sound kind of metallic-y to for the knives and stuff. Anyway, that reoccurred through the whole thing. And one thing I had always done, and I'm guessing you picked up on this at some point. I always went for that Peter and the Wolf thing, where every character has a particular theme,
Yeah,
and I like to reintroduce it there because it gives the character a little more personality.
absolutely.
You
Well, and
know,
that's why I think Bulldog was even more fun to experience from my position, because you got to play a lot more with flourishes and sentimentality, and and when two characters met, they merged instead of clashing.
right?
They would sit and talk. They wouldn't sit and murder.
Yes, that's a big difference.
Yeah.
When somebody's not wielding a knife, it's a little,
And,
but you
well,
get to go through a lot more emotions at that point.
yeah.
Within the score, we even had some Christmassy kind of things that we would throw in, and
Oh, I love the little hints of other Christmas songs and stuff that they kind of kept things feeling light and holiday-y. And so people know as a director went straight from Babysitter Massacre into A Bulldog for Christmas. They were right next to each other.
oh
That's
wow,
that's my type of career. Is
yeah,
I variety is the spice of life. So what it's funny, I always tell people, like, if you want to see the immediate follow-up to Babysitter Massacre, that would be A Bulldog for Christmas, because it has a lot of the same cast. It's shot
yes,
very similarly because they were right next to each other. The big difference is Bulldog benefited massively from the success of Babysitter Massacre. I had invested more money in gear and equipment and
sure.
lights and microphones because Babysitter was successful enough that it made sense to spend. Well, I couldn't even say I spent my savings, because that would suggest I had money. I spent the only credit card any bank would give me, I maxed out for that.
Yeah, well, that's a pretty polar opposite approach to filmmaking there,
Mm-hmm.
and you wrote that as well too,
Yeah,
correct?
that
Yeah.
was before I had become comfortable, not only comfortable but also found more collaborators. Because that's kind of been my favorite thing, is the more movies I make, the more collaborators I meet, whether they're actors or even other directors. I've produced several other directors' films
Yes.
now.
Yeah, I want to talk
You
about
know,
some of those.
yeah, it's an incredible kind of experience to find people you want to work with, and and give them an opportunity to work too. That's the other thing. Like I've worked with several writers now, and they, just never had any luck getting to see something they wrote actually on the screen. And then I meet them and I'm like, look, very few of the films that I put together don't get made. So it's been an interesting experience, but I'm glad. So a Bulldog was actually the last in the line. So that was my sixth feature as a director. That was the last one that I, did everything. I like wrote, directed, produced, edited, et cetera, et cetera. After that, I started doing films where often somebody else wrote them.
Hmm.
But Buzz, I'll say audacity. You have the no, but you had the pleasure of being my composer du jour. So when I had a movie like Awkward Thanksgiving or Making Out, where it was
Yes.
really more of a personal epic, which I did write, I brought you on to compose.
Yeah, and both of those, awkward Thanksgiving, I think that's still my favorite.
I'm very happy with the score on Awkward Thanksgiving. Extremely happy.
And I'm speaking more so for the movie itself.
Oh, well,
You know,
thank you. Thank you
yeah,
very much.
my score, yes, is brilliant, of course, but no, um, I just, first of all, there's not a lot of Thanksgiving movies.
No, you're right.
There's always Christmas movies and you know um, summer movies and things
Halloween
like
movies, stuff
yeah.
like that.
Well,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, a lot of Halloween.
Well, I mean, yeah, Babysitter Massacre was one. So
Yep, exactly. So, but so it being a Thanksgiving film, which is my favorite holiday, and it just kind of it hit me differently. It was like, okay, this this needs this, and I enjoy them all, but that one I think, and maybe Making Out was interesting to do as well because the tell people the premise of that movie.
Making Out is a kind of a weirdo romantic comedy. It's got a lot of unexpected elements for a rom com, but it's about a screenwriter who he's just a working schmo screenwriter, and he ends up having to shoot a scene for a movie he wrote, which is not his forte. And he meets an actress, and they end up deciding that they're going to manufacture a romance because they're both, almost 30 and very frustrated with love. So they start writing dates and then going on them to like out to live out their like movie like fantasy dates. And but then things start to get maybe a little real.
Yeah, and I enjoyed working on that one because with the various dates that they were on, it took us to different things. So like the first date when they're at the fountain and everything, I was able to kind of even implement a little bit of jazz type vibe. I think I kind of pulled from a Vince Guaraldi kind of thing, and then you had the dinner at the Skinhead Club. So, and I was like, okay, where do I pull my inspiration from this? Well, back in the 90s, I used to play this video game called Wolfenstein. I loved Wolfenstein. So I started imagining myself playing it, and I started hearing, some of that kind of music, and so then that just kind of poured out. So there was a lot of different scenes that required entirely different types of music. So it wasn't like each your character had a theme that would happen each time. The Rick is the one that came up with when he was writing out his movie.
Oh yeah, the kind of freeform jazz.
He would just play upright. He just played upright bass,
which was perfect.
Yes.
The idea of like somebody writing while you're hearing like kind of a freeform jazz kind of thing. I think that might be my favorite simple piece of the entire film, because I really felt like it got the essence of that scene, of the idea of like he's just putting anything he can down,
Right.
because he's got to get his writing done for the day. So, and the idea of like having it go that way with like a kind of free form, yeah, I always was so happy with that. And especially there's a big joke reveal where he actually wrote a swear word over and over and over again because he was very upset. And I love the way he did that because it was like even more manic. And then when it ends, it's just kind of like, blah.
Well, that's the kind of person Rick is. So yeah, he did a great one, and typically when we do a film, you give me notes as to
The spotting list.
yeah, which is actually pretty heavily spotted. I think Babysitter Massacre. I don't think there's 5 minutes of that movie that doesn't have some kind of music happening.
Well, and that was I think that was a combination of both of our newness.
Yes.
Because I had never had to make a spotting list for a composer, so I didn't want to leave anything out, or it felt like I wasn't doing my job if I didn't give you like a very detailed spotting list, because I was new to it.
I asked for a scene by scene breakdown from you, so that I knew if I was going to do music here, what emotion and what feeling you wanted to get from that scene.
Well, and with horror movies, obviously there are moments that just absolutely have to have music or they don't work. So I would definitely always put those. I think I started instituting the in bold meant not optional. So that way, because a lot of times there are cues that may not make sense. I mean, you're brought on because you can compose music, not because you're meant to translate my brain to music. That's not the goal. The goal is for you to bring your creativity to the project.
But it does have to align to your vision.
Sure.
Because in Making Out is the only film I can think of where we had a little bit of this.
Well, that was only because I literally could, like, the gag was completely in my brain.
And I didn't get the gag.
Yeah.
So I remember, I turned the movie in and I went to Japan on a tour, and I was home for 2 days, and I had to turn right back around and go to Singapore. And I had an email from you that said, that's not what I asked for in this scene. It wasn't like,
it was like, listen, you son of a...
Yeah, exactly. But it was, no, I wanted, when I said I wanted the wedding march, that's what I wanted.
Yeah. And I'd made a little video with like stock music to try and express it. That way you could nail it from there.
Well, I ended up having to do the wedding march.
Yeah. No, I meant, but I sent you one with stock music so you could see what I was getting at, because it was hard. It's hard to like type out sometimes.
Well, what you're thinking. And this is a a big difference from working with you and working with Andrew, because Andrew does everything to temp music.
Yeah.
And I'll ask him for the temp score. I want to hear where he was seeing and feeling things, and it makes it easy because he edits to that temp music, so I can see the rhythm in his temp score. From his temp score. Movies that did not work well for a composer was, and I only heard about this in the last 5 years. Stanley Kubrick's 2001. Mm-hmm. They actually hired a composer for that movie, but Kubrick had already put in all his temp music, and when the composer did his score, Kubrick was like, "This can't compete with what I have."
And it must be nice to be able to afford to just buy your temp music and lay it into the movie officially.
Yeah, of course, well, he had the Diodato 2001 theme up front.
Yeah.
But then he, like the docking station with the Blue Danube. I don't care who you are as a composer, you're not going to top that.
No, and that's fair. That's actually why I don't cut with temp tracks.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to fall in love with a version of the movie that no one's ever going to see.
People, that can happen.
Yeah.
I've heard that with directors a lot, where they're just like, I'm married to my temp music.
And unlike Kubrick, if
No,
I love a Warren Zevon song so much, I can't afford to put it in the
right,
movie. So it's just gotta go. Um,
right, or have somebody write a knockoff kind of.
exactly. Yeah. I mean, really. So I that's why I generally avoid temp music. Now, my editor Eric, who started editing for me after Bulldog for Christmas, the next all the films,
Mhm.
subsequent films he's edited for me. Eric sometimes edits to temp, but I tell him please eliminate the temp before I see it,
Uh,
because it's totally fine if that helps him, but I don't want it to become a part of how I understand the scenes. Because one of the most exciting things is when you get the score. Because usually the with my workflow, once the film is locked, it goes to the composer, and then I take the film and I start doing my sound build, my sound design, of everything that isn't music,
right.
you know, so sound effects, dialogue, stuff like that. So it's not quite a mix yet. It's just a build. And that I can do for 15 hours a day because I don't really, volume isn't that important. And.
Now, see, on Babysitter Massacre, I didn't realize that you were doing that. So, I basically, in addition to the score, I'm creating Foley.
Oh, well, and it
And
definitely did not hurt.
right, yeah, no, I could see where some of it was you, like the very first scene, when you hear that knife go in. Um, I spent a lot of time getting that sound. Um, and that was the first time I'd ever done anything that was even remotely sound design.
Mm-hmm.
But it was fun.
Well, and I think it's Brad Fidel who did or Fidel, I think I'm saying his name right. The guy who did Terminator 1 and Terminator 2, the
Hmm.
music. He was one of the first composers to start blurring the line between sound design and music by using real sounds, but using them to his own tempo, I guess is a way I'll put it.
Right.
And I think that there's a lot to be said for that, for using the music in ways that are not traditional, because especially when you're making low budget movies, I mean, we're allowed to take risks. Other
Yeah.
people are not allowed to take those risks, because a great poet once said, "Mo money, mo problems," and it's completely accurate.
Yeah.
Uh, but so one of my favorite things though is as I'm doing the build, and as I'm getting like the sound effects in and all that stuff, when I get the score, I drop it into my timeline,
Hmm.
and that gets to be the first time I watch my movie,
Yeah.
because it's actually my movie. Whether I decide, that a small piece needs to be changed, or I decide to like bring a piece low into the mix versus high into the mix, that's all details. But the fact that I get to sit there and like hear music swells and see, like, that's the first time I get to watch the movie, and that's the moment where I stop having post-production depression syndrome, where I'm just like, another day in the mine, type. That's the moment where I go like, this is a movie. I'm making a movie. I don't even care that I have another 50 hours of mixing. I've got a movie now, and it's very
It's
exciting.
yeah, and you talked about post production syndrome. Once I turn it in and you give me the thumbs up or whatever, um, I'm like, man, I've just dedicated the last 4 weeks of all my day. Now what do I do? And obviously there's always something that can be done, but
Oh, sure.
it takes a while to just let go of it.
I bet. Yeah.
Because I want to watch it, and I want to second guess things that I've done, even though it's too late. And the biggest nail biter of all is when I've sent you the score and waiting for you to watch it and getting your feedback.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, oh, is he going to like this? Because I might have taken a chance doing this. Um, so getting a thumb or two thumbs up was always a because I don't think if you haven't done film scoring, um, you don't realize how intense it is. Just like if you haven't made a film, you don't realize how intense it can be.
My speaking of making out, so my mother was an extra in the wedding scene. She's the lady in the front row, and my mother had never seen me work
Oh,
ever. And she had to see me directing all of the stuff that happened in that location before the wedding guests got there, the fake wedding guests or whatever you want to call them, and then all the stuff with the wedding guests. And I only directed, I think that was 4.5 pages for the day. It was the last thing of the whole movie. The movie was wrapped after that. And my mother was just like, how do you do all of this? And I was like, Mom, this is like, we wrapped after 4 hours. This was, or 5 hours. It's an easy day.
Easy day.
Like, I mean, I did throw, extra hard because I knew that I'd be done at 1. So,
Right.
I didn't pace myself as much as I might, try to be wise about. But because when you're directing extras, you're like screaming and jumping and miming because they're not used to being directed, so you want to get them excited and get them,
Yeah,
with
yeah.
an experienced actor, you don't do what's called a line reading very often, where you just
Right.
read the line how you want it
You
delivered.
just wait for them to come out of their trailer and deliver it.
And you use so pretentious, but you use adjectives. You have to use adjectives if you want to direct a real actor. But it's also, a real actor, an actor who has a lot of experience or whatever. If they say, "Could you give me a line reading on that?" Then it's time to give them a line reading, and they'll ask
Yeah.
for them sometimes
It's,
because sometimes they just don't understand.
producing an artist is the exact same way.
Yeah.
Some people come in and they don't really need too much guidance. You just kind of point out little things. Other people are like, all right, how do you want me to approach this song?
Yeah.
I haven't been able to find where I relate to it yet. And then you have to be able to do that. So I always tell people that producing a record is very similar to directing a film
I think you would be right.
because
Yeah.
you're in charge of everything.
Oh yeah.
The only thing I amend that with is that the producer is not God. So if an artist just really doesn't like something that's going on, and I cannot convince them otherwise that this is for their benefit or whatever, I try for a compromise, or I just go ahead and let them have it.
I don't want to say, because I don't work with a lot of difficult actors. I've been very fortunate, but a lot of my job of what I'm good at is being able to manage mentality and ego.
Yeah.
Have somebody show up on set and notice, wow, they look kind of grumpy, and then go sit with them and cheer them up
Yes.
before it's time for work.
There's so many psychological aspects to both of our jobs.
Yeah, definitely.
I tell people that as a producer, you have to be their psychologist or their therapist. You have to be their mother, their father. Sometimes you're their freaking drug dealer. You're their dinner companion.
Yeah.
You have all these different roles that you have to play, and you have to make it look like you're not doing anything.
Yeah, if you in that way you are God, because if you did everything right, it'll look like you didn't do anything at all. And it's completely true. The first movie I ever made, the guy who helped finance it, I literally had to like listen to him bitch about his girlfriend and then bitch about being single. Like I had to really placate him.
Yeah.
And what else was I gonna do? Like there'd be no movie if I didn't have his help.
And you have to be genuine about it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And it's not that you don't care, you just don't really want to hear it for 4 hours.
Well, yeah, and there is a point where you have to kind of stop and be like, do you sell yourself as professional? Then there has to be a point where you stop whatever you're doing and be professional. And there are lots of good examples of people who are very professional. They may have all of their demons, all of their problems in the world, but then when they plop down to do what they're supposed to do, they do it. And then there are people that don't. So you're always hoping to get it. Like John Carradine's a great example. I've heard amazing stories about John Carradine, way back in the day, because he drank a lot, but he was notorious for just, no matter how drunk he was, no matter how tired he was, he always knew his lines completely perfect, and he could almost always get it in one take. But people would always be shocked because he'd come on set and he'd be like, he'd just woken up in the trailer, he was passed out sleeping or whatever, and he would literally walk in and then just do the whole scene. And people would be like, how? Like, I didn't think he's not even good enough to like walk by himself to the set. How did he nail it?
That would be similar to like jazz pianist Bill Evans. He was a heroin addict. Most people didn't know. He never missed a gig. He could be in that big nod backstage, and as soon as they say Mr. Evans, he sits down and just the most gorgeous piano player you've ever heard. There's some people that can transcend all that. The art of what they do is just so instinctive or inbred, in them.
It's in their DNA at that point. They've just
Yeah.
put it into, and I will say, here's something where music, I believe the music industry and the film industry are identical. If you want to be liked and you want to work a lot, really just show up on time and sober, and you will
Uh,
be special. You won't just
absolutely.
be liked, you will be appreciated. People will be like, whoa, every time that guy shows up on time and sober.
Yeah, that is great advice for anybody in any kind of job,
Well,
but
yeah. I mean,
especially
except
in
pilot.
yeah. But in music and like you said in film, it's just so important because especially if you're the guy, you're setting the example and the tone for everything else. So you should. I'm usually early to everything
Yeah, me too.
because being a non-driver, I have to coordinate. Okay, how am I going to get here? So I typically factor in way more time than I need, but I'd rather sit there for 20 minutes and wait for you than you sit there for 5 minutes waiting for me.
Yeah, nothing makes me angrier than when an actor is like 25 minutes early to set, and I'm like, man, I was 20 minutes early to set.
Oh,
Like,
they beat
I'm
you.
just, you son of a burn. So that always drives me nuts.
um, Another film you did that I didn't get the pleasure of scoring, but I did do the theme song for was Calamity Jane's
Yes.
Revenge. Um,
Yes.
that's become one of my favorite pieces.
Oh yeah, it's synonymous with that. I mean, that
The
movie.
thing that was weird about that, I had just gotten a new VST, virtual synth technology instrument. And every time I get a new tool, some people call them toys, they're not, they're tools. I try and do something from beginning to end with it
Yeah.
and nothing else. And on that particular film, I used this one instrument through the entire thing. Yeah, it did all my strings, it did all the snares, and then I had Rick play the baritone guitar because I wanted to. My thinking on the movie, because I didn't get to see what your intro shot was. I don't even think you gave me a time limit.
I probably said I probably said something like 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, somewhere in there was
So
probably
yeah, you
that's
may have
usually what I'd
given me
say.
a little range.
Yeah.
So my the first thing, because it's a western, you don't get any more western than those spaghetti westerns back in
Yeah.
the day.
Oh yeah.
So I incorporated a little. I incorporated that in the beginning, but then I moved to kind of a Magnificent Seven
Hmm.
meets the Marlboro Man. Again, I'm pulling from my childhood here, and at the end, I borrowed. No, I won't say I borrowed. I patterned after the TV show Dallas.
Okay, I can
If
see
you
that.
listen to that ending that I have when it does and it does, and then the big hit at the end, um, that and then the guitar that was Dallas.
Ah,
I made no, I didn't make any bones about it. Most people never picked up on it, but it was such a different genre for me. And that's what I thought was the coolest thing in the world. I was like, I get to write a cowboy song.
well, and with that one of the main reasons I didn't send you a opening to like do it too was because it wasn't done yet.
I think I remember that.
So instead, I took your music and kind of cut the opening credits to your music instead,
Exactly.
which as an editor is not a bad way to go. I mean, like it definitely helps you get an inherent sense of timing and helps you have some fun with it. And that's one thing that unfortunately is a cruel reality of independent movies, and especially B movies and stuff like that, is a lot of times there's not a big allotment given for music.
Right.
And I wish that that weren't the case because it drives me crazy. Like you did a lot of music for Boggy Creek the series,
That's right.
but we did not have an allotment of even, I mean, not just money, but of time to have every episode have an original score or a rough
Right.
original score. So instead we just did pieces and stings and stuff like that, and then I kind of, which I thought worked pretty well
I
though, because I
think
got
I
to
did
edit to
that
them.
for Scare Waves as well.
um
I
oh yeah,
set
you did, you totally did. Yeah.
and one of the things that I did for both of those, because knowing that you had time constraints and things like that, I think I did everything at the same tempos and in the same keys,
Yeah.
so that you could put together whatever you wanted to do.
Yeah, and you would give me like you'd give me stems basically, is what we
Yes.
call it. Do you guys call it stems too?
Uh huh.
Okay, cool. uh you'd give me basically stems so I could have the whole piece, but then I could break it all down to just the drums, or
Right.
vice versa, have the
Right.
drums start and then bring the one thing in, and then have,
Or
and
or just the sound effects and
yeah, and that would let me kind of make it kind of a score,
yeah.
as opposed to just, and editing to it again helps a lot. That was yeah, that was just the situation. We didn't really have the option, and what's funny is the producer even said, when he was listening to it, he was shocked to realize that none of that was library music. That like it, because I had you do all the horror elements, and I had
Right.
Todd the Fox do all of the swamp
Swamp.
elements, is what I
Exactly.
call it, because he's a slide guitar player.
Yeah.
So, and it worked great. So basically, anytime the characters are talking to each other,
Yeah.
and anytime the monster was around, it was all you.
I get to be the monster.
Yeah, buddy. So, and that was, and that was a divide and conquer, because because of the lack of time available.
Yes.
You guys were working at the same time on this, on the same show, and you got to share it, which I thought worked great. But so that's why on a movie like Awkward Thanksgiving or Making Out or even Bulldog for Christmas, where the buck completely stops with me, those are the ones where we get to, really throw in a full score and
Right.
and give you a month. That's the other thing is uh a lot of scores, like I talked to this guy named Chuck Serino. He scored a bunch of movies for Roger Corman and stuff like that. He said they never gave him more than 2 weeks,
That's
which is
you know,
crazy.
it is. I've done some things for television, and you're lucky if you get 48 hours.
I don't doubt that at all.
You know, sir. Some. I always tell people this when it comes to film. The director has all the time in the world to decide when he's going to make this movie. If it takes him 10 weeks or if it takes him 10 days, it doesn't matter. Nobody's waiting for that movie. By the time it gets to the composer, there's usually some sort of release date
Oh yeah.
or screening date. So all of a sudden, you're the last person to get the film, and you're pretty much not the only person with a deadline,
Yeah.
but
But you have one of the tightest ones for sure.
it's one of the tightest ones. And I am a procrastinator by nature,
Me too.
and I will put something off until I can no longer put it off to get it done.
And then the fire is lit.
Yes, and then I just attack it with a vengeance. But I did find through Babysitter Massacre, I love doing horror. I'd never written anything for horror before, and until the very final scene, the kitchen scene, I never once used a cliche horror line or whatever. You always get the Bernard Herrmann set the tone for that kind of stuff. The closest, and I don't know if you even caught this, because I try and disguise things very subtly, but when they're struggling on the floor there, I've actually got the Wizard of Oz, the wicked.
I totally noticed that. No, I totally noticed it was. It reminded me of that. I didn't know if it was like a full blown reference, but I totally noticed
Yeah,
it.
again, my childhood.
Oh sure.
I grew up on cartoons, and cartoons always had the greatest music. It was either classical or big band jazz. opera, you know. So all those things are pouring into my little tiny brain, and when composing for film, they all come pouring back.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very weird. And I don't know if you get some of that when you're writing a movie or directing or how.
I have noticed that I am referencing things in my movies years after I've made them. I will realize that like I must have had that in mind because I'll watch something that I've watched a million times.
Right.
And I'll be like, hey, yeah, that must have informed that decision because
Yeah.
there's no way I don't remember this movie. So
Yeah.
it's definitely fun to kind of see where people come from when you watch their work. You always can kind of spot it.
How many hours do you think you spend watching your movie when it's being made?
Oh, you mean in post production, or like
Yeah, yeah. Once
yeah.
you've got
Once
your
it's
dailies.
shot.
Yeah, you've
Okay.
got your daily rush or whatever.
I try to keep it to under 15.
Really?
Yeah. Well, but I don't do the first cut, and that literally reduces it by like 10.
Okay.
So,
Because
and this is over time, you know, like getting more experience with it.
because I've probably seen every one of your movies. I have to say probably 75 to 100 times.
Wow. I mean,
Be-
I don't
because
doubt it.
you know, just take a particular scene. Um, I'm watching it to see what I'm reading your notes, and then I'm watching to see what I'm getting from it, and then how we can incorporate the two. Then I just start free forming, playing piano to it,
Yeah.
and getting my sense of where then I have to start going through instruments. But while I'm doing all this, I'm still watching that scene. So though I won't say I've watched your movie beginning to end.
Oh, okay.
75
Yeah, that makes more
to
sense.
100.
So I was referring 15 times watching it beginning to end.
Yeah. Okay. I'm probably right there with you.
Okay, well that makes sense.
By
Yeah.
the time it's done,
Yeah.
anywhere from 15 to 20, 25.
Well, and with the mixing process and the coloring process on my end, it really comes down to how many times I've done it now. You know, Babysitter Massacre, I mean, it had to have been 300 hours of me between editing and mixing and coloring. It had to have been, but it was only my fourth movie or fifth movie,
Yeah.
something like that. Now, you know, when I'm on like number 17 right now, I can literally do and I do this and it sounds crazy, but like I've just done it so many times. I can do like spot checks on the video color while I'm building. Whoa, I hit my mic. While I'm building the sound design. I'll just do them
Right.
both at the same time because, you know, I've gotten to a point where I know how to use all the tools. I understand them. When I hear the sound a way I don't like, I'm like, oh, I've solved this problem so many times already. Like click, click, click.
Yeah.
Sounds good. You know?
Yeah, because we always run into the same problems.
Mm-hmm.
They you know, like a good virus, there might be a variant or two.
Yeah.
But
Well, then every now and then there'll be a brand new one.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and you're shocked.
Yeah.
You're like, what?
now you have a thing that because you have a Patreon account.
Yes, sir.
Tell people a little bit about that, where they can find, because are everything we're talking about, is that on your Patreon?
All of the comedies are definitely. Babysitter Massacre is not on there, but it's owned by a distributor. You can find that on like Amazon or something like that. But if you go to my Patreon, which is patreon.com/incredibly handsome, very easy to remember. If you go to,
Just
if you
look
go to,
that
yeah, right. If you go in there, we have different tiers, and the $10 a month tier allows you to not only see all of the films that I am able to post on there, but it also gives you sometimes timed preview links. So sometimes like I'll put up a movie, but I can only have it up there for like 3 or 4 weeks because once it's delivered, I don't
Right.
own it anymore, and then I got to take it down. But even at just $1, people get access to some of the older films. They get access to like some of the photo sessions I do, which I am like right before we started this recording, I'm working on a really, really gorgeous photo set with J. Ania Lupa. She's a model. You've seen her before. You'll recognize her immediately.
Okay.
But we did some really cool shots, and I did some of my first ever glamour shots outdoors. I've never done much outdoor photography with
Your,
models.
your stuff with Mary Lee
Thank you.
was awesome.
Thank you. She's a phenomenal model and a fun collaborator. She'll hit me up and be like, I want to be covered in blood, or I want to be Little Red Riding Hood. And I'm like, we can do it.
I loved her right away from Babysitter Massacre.
She's a phenomenal human being as well as a phenomenal actor.
Yeah,
And
I bet.
yeah. So and every photo session I've done before is on there. So there's just at this point there's 2 years worth of content on Patreon for people to check out. And I'm very thankful for it because, man, during the pandemic, that Patreon, I mean, it doesn't cover my rent, but it covered enough bills that I felt like maybe I could get through.
Yeah.
Now, so I'm very thankful.
You also have a thing called popcorn fodder.
Yes, Popcorn Fodder. It's a TV show.
Okay, tell us about that.
Sure. You can find it on YouTube if you just search Popcorn Fodder. You should be able to find it pretty quickly. It's a movie host show. It's kind of like not quite as goofy as Elvira or what have you, but I host these older kind of forgotten classic movies that I like, that a lot of people kind of bemoan as not very good. Movies like The Devil Times 5 or Bruce Lee Fights Back from the Grave. And I try to dig up all of the things that are interesting about those movies, and I interrupt the film every maybe 15 minutes or so to kind of give you a breakdown of what has just happened, because some of these movies are real WTF moments, and then also sometimes give a perspective as a filmmaker. And that's actually one of the things that I enjoy about Popcorn Fodder the most, because I watch a guy named Joe Bob Briggs who does something similar to what I do, but he's a critic. I'm not a critic. In fact, the motto of Popcorn Fodder is there are no bad films, only bad audiences.
And you're a fan,
huge fan,
and that makes all the difference in the world.
And so every now and then, we showed Bruce Lee Fights Back from the Grave, I pointed out that there are scenes of a parade that obviously they didn't have permission to shoot, that they obviously just ran out there and filmed it. And then I told a story about the end of Depression, the movie, how I had no permission to film in the nightclub that the band plays in. We literally just got on stage after the sound check was done and acted like we were supposed to be doing that. So nobody said anything, and we filmed, but it was a 1-to-1 ratio for every second of film that was recorded. That was the film in the movie, because there were no second takes when you could be thrown out any second. But it's a really fun thing. It's, it's totally free to watch. If you happen to be a huge horror movie fan and you have a membership at Screambox, which is kind of like a Netflix for horror movies, it's also on there. No additional fees. But if you search YouTube, you'll find it on there. And it's a really good time, especially if you just want to kick back and shut your brain off. And my dogs co-host it with me, so there's always the awe factor.
I love your dogs to death, and I've never met them.
Henwolf came in here and put her head on my lap for a minute while we were talking.
My cat G lays at my feet while I do this, just like a dog. And as soon as I get up and go to another room, she's got to be there.
Aww.
She's 16. She'll be 16 on Christmas. So finally something in this place older than me. But didn't you do some backyard screenings and stuff over the summer?
Yeah, they weren't for business or anything. They were just solely for pleasure. So last summer, actually, when when the pandemic was really cinching in, and we were really we really realized that anybody telling you in 2 weeks it's going to be over was full of crap. I used to set up this big screen in my backyard, but it took 40 minutes to build it, and and you had to have all these people helping. So I was like, you know what? I want to see if there's a better way to do this. So I found a pull down movie screen that is obscenely big. It's 144 inches diagonally.
Whoa, you're almost IMAX. So.
And I found it, and it was at a price I couldn't believe. So I just bought it. I was actually just looking to put them in my wish list for later.
Right.
But it was so cheap. It was under $200. I was like, that's mine. I have to get it now. There's no way it'll be that price tomorrow. And I was right. The next day, the price was $400. Ooh. So I bought it. It came in, it was so big, it had to be delivered on an 18-wheeler. This 18-wheeler pulls into my residential neighborhood. It was a courier service because it was so big.
How heavy is it?
it's not very heavy, but it's like I don't know, a solid
Like
9 feet, 10 feet
cylindrical.
long.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like 9 feet, 10 feet long. So it just can't be UPS'd. It can't be. When I bought my 65-inch TV, it had to come on a courier truck too, because it's like they just, once they get a certain size, it just that's the way they ship them. But so we mounted it actually to the brick on the side of my house. So now instead of like all this time to set up a thing, you pull the screen down, the projector takes 5 minutes to set up, and
Yeah,
then boom, it's movie night, baby.
all right.
So we've watched all kinds of fun things, and actually I had to work last weekend, so we're doing my birthday party this Friday, and we'll be showing we haven't decided for sure, but I think I'm going to make everybody watch Jaws the Revenge, because it's one of my favorite silly movies. And then I don't
Right.
know what'll be next. Last year for my birthday we watched Terminator 2 and Monster Squad.
Okay.
So it's just birthday boy choice, but we've done all kinds of fun shows. We did like the Piranha movies to celebrate summer starting, because
Right.
there's like summer movies. We watched some Friday the 13th movies on Friday the 13th, and it's a real fun way. And especially during those earlier days of the pandemic, when you didn't want to be indoors with people and stuff like that, it was like, well, everybody can come to my house, and the screen is goddamn big enough. You could be 17 feet away from each other if you want,
Well,
and
even
you're
I
still
could
going to watch
probably
it.
see it with my lack of vision.
The screen is so big. The second screen at the Art House Theater in downtown Dayton, their screen is smaller than the screen on the side of my house.
Wow. You have to start charging admission.
I tell people,
you
bring
probably
pizza.
have
That's your
neighbors sitting
tithe.
up on
Yeah.
their roof, and
I had the neighbor next door watch like 15 minutes of Monster Squad last time I showed it there. He just
Yeah.
was hanging at the fence. I was like, dude, you can hop the fence and grab a chair if you want.
yeah, no, I think that's great. I think you've got your hands in a lot of things going on.
I try
And
to.
yeah, and that's a good thing. So I definitely appreciate you taking
Of
a little
course.
bit of time out of the day. Uh,
Anytime for you, and for you anytime, sincerely.
well, I appreciate that. And one last question. When,
Yes.
maybe two last questions.
Oh dear. Okay. All right.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Getting
Uh,
comfortable for this.
when is Babysitter Massacre 2 going to take place, or is it?
Well, it's happening. There's no, so I'll tell you exactly what I've had to tell everybody, because this is the most asked question I get.
Huh.
Babysitter Massacre 2 was supposed to shoot at the end of May of 2020. Obviously that did not
Right.
happen. We've been stuck in this weird situation where Babysitter Massacre 2 is a very big deal to me.
Yeah.
And a big deal to the people who kickstarted it. I don't want to air a bunch of stuff, but the reason we didn't shoot sooner than 2020 was there was a death in the family of one of our lead actors, and like a tragic sudden death. And that made me decide that it was more important to give them space and time,
Sure.
because it's not like anybody. Well, if I had known what was going to happen in 2020, I would have at least been a little bit more time conscious. But at the time, it was like, oh, we can wait
Yeah.
4 months.
Sure.
Like, it'll be the summer. That'll be the perfect time to
Perfect
shoot.
time.
Yeah. So 2020 happens, and we're being told all through 2020, yeah, it's going to be normal soon. It's going to be this soon. It's going to be that. I kept amping up production. I kept, rewriting the script, and then we couldn't do it. And it got to the point where it was depressing
Oh.
to like amp up and be like, we're going to do it. And then be like, there's no
and
way
then
we're
you
ever
just
going to do
always
it.
have a constant letdown.
So I let the Kickstarter people know that, and I'll let everybody listening to this know that what I basically decided was, regardless of how popular or unpopular this decision may be to people, that the movie has to be what I want it to be, because it's my dream to make a sequel to Babysitter Massacre, the movie that started my career, and to do it the way that I envision. So right now I'm in the midst of deep revisions, because some of the actors have now moved away that we
Right.
were originally going to work with. Life situations have changed, and we're also just kind of eyeing the Delta variant thing. But it looks like that's going to work out okay, finally. But 2 months ago, I was like, I don't trust friggin' anything. I'm waiting. So,
I
because
think
there's
there's
nothing.
light at the end of the tunnel, and it's
For
not
sure.
another train.
Well, and there's nothing more heartbreaking on a project like that for me than being ready to go and then having to pull back.
Sure.
It's just so hard to keep your mind going. So So that's what's really going on right now. I'm rewriting it. We are planning to shoot some very soon, and then we're going to get our main cast back to, the ones that can work with us. We're going to bring them in, and that's been the other thing too, is comfort. The level of comfort. Some of the actors are not. We're not comfortable coming back at the beginning of the summer when we may have been able to try and shoot because
Sure.
they weren't vaccinated yet, or it doesn't even matter what their
Yeah.
excuses are. Everybody has the right to
To,
their own degree of comfort.
exactly.
So, but because of that, I was like, I told some people when they were saying like, we really want to see the movie, I was like, look, do you want the movie to be like a webcam horror movie? Because that's how it's going to be if I do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
I don't want it to be that. I want it to be what I imagine, this big John Carpenter's Halloween 2 style sequel to the punk rock Babysitter Massacre.
Well, and even that, I kind of look, I when I tell people about that movie, I always use the adjectives cult classic.
Well, I don't, but that's because creators can never do that. Creators
Right,
aren't
but
allowed to believe it'll be a cult classic.
it from when it was running on Amazon,
Mm-hmm.
and from some of the comments and things like that it was an obvious homage to 80s horror films.
Without a doubt, yeah.
And people recognize that, and so many of those films back then have become just they're part of our what's the word I'm looking for?
Our culture, our lexicon,
Yeah, exactly.
Everything. Yeah, absolutely.
So I feel okay saying cult classic.
Oh, and you're welcome to. I know that directors are not supposed to speak in such terms.
Sure. All right. Now my last question to you is, if someone is looking to get into filmmaking nowadays, what's your advice to them?
My best advice is start. And I actually talked to a couple of filmmakers out at that convention I was at, who were like 16, 15 years old, 16 years old. And one of these kids, he's 16-year-old kid, he really, honestly, I'm not going to get emotional, but he reminded me of me. His mom was walking around the convention with him, and he was super excited. And his mother had to be the one to go, he wants to know if you have any advice for him.
Huh.
So I looked at him and I said, I told him a few things, general suggestions of like, you got to go make your movie. And he was really appreciative. But then she was like, ask him the other question. And he had this little camcorder, this little cheap, I mean, not cheap, but not a big expensive camcorder, but he had a little camcorder. And his mom explained that his grandma got that for him because he said he wanted to make movies. And he wanted to know, is this good enough? And I told him, I was like, listen, man, the thing you need to learn today is that the best camera on the planet is the one you have, because it will let you make the movie and tell the story you want to say. So don't let anything stop you. Don't believe that you don't have enough money yet. Oh, once I get that camera, I'll make my movie.
Yeah.
Shut up. You could be dead tomorrow. Get up, take your phone and go tell a story, because I swear, I've heard tons of people talk about how they wish they'd made a movie. I've never heard anybody go, man, I just wish I hadn't shot my first movie on a phone, or man, I wish I hadn't shot my first movie on a cheap camera. Nobody feels that way.
Yeah.
So stop telling yourself no. The rest of the world is going to tell you no a whole hell of a lot, and don't join them. Don't join that chorus.
Yeah, that's great advice.
So I take it kind of personally, because I hate seeing people be disenfranchised or discouraged.
Well, because if you always wait for what's considered the latest and the greatest, by the time you get it, something else later and greater has come along.
Well, and it's just fear. That's all it is. It's just fear. Because at the end of the day, you can make a movie on anything. You can make a great album on a $200 used MacBook Pro if you put your heart into it.
Yeah, I've seen people do amazing stuff in GarageBand on an iPad.
Yeah. It's incredible.
So, all right. Well, those were the last two questions, I promise. So, again, I thank you very much for
my pleasure
hanging out, and let's hope we get to see each other this year.
I'm very hopeful. I'll be there if there's an event. I'll be there.
All right. Well, there's an event. It's going to be 3 days this year, from what I understand. Two in Cine and one live stream.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, so cool. That's a cool little thing. So hopefully we'll get to do our little pre-show hang and after hang.
It would make me very happy, my friend.
Same here. Henrik, take care, and we'll talk to you soon.
I look forward to it. Thank you for having me.
All right, man. Thank you.